Ranvir and Mahi were sitting in the back seat of the car. In that car, there was only the driver. Mahi was still crying with her head down. Ranvir saw Mahi and switched on the car's partition. Then he pulled Mahi close to him. And he started caressing her head with his chest. Mahi also started caressing Ranvir's chest. Ranvir asked him to divert his mind. "If you don't shut up now, I will kiss you right now. Do you want me to do something like this?" Hearing this, Mahi raised her head and looked at him. And said innocently, "But I feel like crying on my own." Ranvir was impressed by the innocence of his little wife for a moment. He kissed her forehead and put her head back on his chest. In a short while, everyone reached Kapoor mansion. Now Mahi's crying had stopped. Anita ji stopped both of them from entering the house. And after the rituals of entering the house, the rest of the rituals were over. Then Mahi was taken to Ranvir's room. But Rudra did not let Ranvir go to his room. And forcibly took him to the terrace, where Vedant was already sitting with wine. Rudra made Ranvir sit on the chair. And he held a glass of wine in his hand. Ranvir said, "What is all this, Rudra? Let me go." Saying this, as soon as Ranvir got up, Rudra sat him back and said, "Ranvir, you got married today. So you should celebrate a little, right? Won't you celebrate with us?" Hearing this, Ranvir shook his head. And in a single breath, emptied the glass and then got up and left. Seeing this, Rudra made a face and said, "Bro, you forgot me after marriage." Vedant took a sip of wine and said, "Rudra, let him go. Now he will not be patient." Saying this, he looked at Rudra and winked. Hearing this, Ranvir said, "Yes, so? Who would want to be patient? Whose wife is so beautiful?" Saying this, Ranvir put the wine in his glass again. And drank it in a single breath. After drinking it, Ranvir said, "Now you guys enjoy, I'm leaving." Saying this, he turned around to go. It was then that once again Vedant said, "Don't scare the girl too much. Be a little soft with her." Hearing this, Ranvir smiled on his lips. Although he was standing with his back towards her, he smiled and said while shaking his head slowly, "Brother-in-law will never improve." Saying this, he left from there. Ranvir's room was quite big. And it was decorated very beautifully. Mahi was holding her lehenga and was looking around the room. She had been to this room once before. But today's decoration was so good that Mahi was looking at everything carefully with her big eyes. Mahi came in front of a big king-size bed and stood there. And started looking at Ranvir's big photo behind the bed. She said with all her heart, "He is staring at me in this photo too. Now I will have to stay with him in this room. By the way, he is very handsome. Just like a hero." Thinking this, a lovely smile came on Mahi's lips, which left quickly. Then thinking, she said to herself, "But he acts like a villain." Then Mahi said with a plan to hide from Ranvir. "Should I hide somewhere in this room? When he will sleep, I will come out." She was thinking that someone took care of her back with his cold hands. And kissed her neck and said with his warm breath, "Do you want to hide from me, wifey?" Hearing Ranvir's voice, Mahi suddenly turned around. And said with surprise, "How do you know?" Then she remembered what she just said. That's why she changed her mind and said, I was not thinking anything like that. Am I afraid of you? That I have to hide from you?" Saying this, Mahi looked down and started looking here and there. Seeing her actions, Ranvir smiled and said, "Yes, I know you are not afraid of me. So let's start the work ahead." Saying this, Ranvir grabbed her waist more tightly and made himself poor. Then Mahi said in fear, "Which work?" Ranvir said, "Hey, it's our first night. And this is also an important ritual of marriage, which is necessary to follow." Saying this, Ranvir removed the dupatta from Mahi's head and separated it. But Mahi was busy in her own thinking. That's why she didn't even pay attention to Ranvir's actions. Mahi thought and said to herself, Aunt didn't tell me about such an important ritual. And Priya didn't tell me either. This Priya is also of no use. Let me meet her, then I'll tell her. Mahi came to her senses when Ranvir kissed her on the neck and bit her. Mahi's mouth started to scream a little. And she grabbed Ranvir's sherwani tightly. Ranvir picked Mahi up in his arms and laid her on his bed. Mahi had lowered her eyes with shame. She was only wearing a choli and lehenga in front of Ranvir. Ranvir had kept both his hands next to Mahi's. And he was looking at Mahi's beautiful face closely. The vermilion on Mahi's forehead was increasing her beauty. In her soft neck, Ranvir was wearing a black pearl and diamond Mangalsutra, which repeatedly made him realize that Mahi was now his. Ranvir was slowly moving towards Mahi's soft lips. Mahi was feeling very ashamed of Ranvir's eyes at this time. His cheeks were turning pink. When he saw Ranvir bowing down to his face, he turned his face to the other side and closed his eyes tightly. Seeing Mahi do this, Ranvir smiled on his lips. He kissed Mahi's neck and took a deep breath, which he wanted to bring the scent of Mahi's body into himself. By kissing Ranvir, Mahi was feeling a different tickling today. He grabbed his lehenga tightly. While kissing his neck, Ranvir was also biting lightly, from which Mahi's hiccups were coming out. His hiccups were making Ranvir even more excited, because of which he was becoming more aggressive than before. He saw Mahi's face and kept his lips on her lips and started kissing her passionately. After a while, he moved away from Mahi. Then Mahi started taking long and deep breaths. Also, she was looking at Ranvir with a little anger. Seeing Mahi like this, Ranvir smiled mischievously on his lips. He said while caressing Mahi's cheeks, "Sorry baby, you can't stop me today. If anyone can stop me, it's Ranvir himself." Then Ranvir turned Mahi around. And while kissing her back, he opened the strap of her choli. Mahi was not able to open her eyes due to shame. Then Ranvir straightened her back. Looking at Mahi's face, he understood that Mahi was feeling very shy at that time. Mahi had still closed her eyes. Ranvir had lowered the light of the room with the remote. Now there was a little yellow light in that room. Ranvir was looking at Mahi from top to bottom. In the dim light of the room, Mahi was looking very beautiful, as if every part of her body was scratched with a lot of time. Today, Ranvir saw Mahi like this for the first time. Seeing her, Ranvir was now losing control of himself. He started kissing Mahi's lips again. This time Ranvir was behaving more wild than before. Being aggressive and wild like this, Mahi was also in pain. But she also knew that it was not in her hands to stop Ranvir. So she was tolerating everything quietly. Mahi's skin was so soft that even one kiss was making red marks on her skin. On the other hand, getting Mahi so close to Ranvir, the heat of Ranvir's body was increasing with time. And with that, his desire for Mahi was increasing. Mahi was trembling with fear at that time, which Ranvir also felt. He looked at Mahi's face, which was completely red. He kissed Mahi's earlobe and said, "Don't worry, I won't move forward until you are ready for it. But remember, I won't wait too long. So it's better that you prepare yourself for all this soon. Because every time, I cannot control myself." Saying this, he kissed Mahi's forehead and walked towards the washroom. He went to the washroom, stood under the shower and started trying to relax himself. But again and again, Mahi's beautiful figure was coming in front of his eyes, because of which, the water in the shower was not able to calm the heat inside him. After about an hour, he felt a little better. So he changed and came out of the washroom. At that time, he was only wearing a lower. He sat down and saw that Mahi was already asleep. The marks of the bite on his neck were clearly visible. Ranvir came to him and lay down. He hugged him and kissed his forehead. And he kept looking at him for a while. Because he was tired, he also went to sleep for a while. The morning sun came from the window and began to fall on Ranvir's face. In his sleep, he shook his phone with his hand, which he had kept on the table next to his bed. He saw the time in it and put it back. Then he looked at Mahi, who was sleeping peacefully with her head on her chest. Her hair was trying to cover her face. Mahi was looking innocent like a sleeping baby. The hands on her forehead were red. She was on Ranvir's shoulder at that time. Ranvir was getting a new feeling today. Mahi had really become his wife. Now only Ranvir had a right on her. Thinking this, there was a smile on Ranvir's lips and peace on his face. Ranvir held Mahi's hand and looked at her henna, in which Ranvir's name was written very beautifully. Ranvir kissed her hand. Seeing the henna of his name on Mahi's hand and the vermilion of his name on her forehead, he was feeling a different happiness in his heart. Then someone knocked on the door of his room. Ranvir did not want to wake Mahi yet. But someone was constantly knocking on his door. Ranvir got irritated and looked at the door. But because of the sound of the door being knocked, Mahi woke up. When Mahi realized what condition she was in and where she was sleeping, she suddenly started getting up in a hurry. But Ranvir did not let her get up and brought her dreams back. How will Mahi's married life be? Will Ranvir's fear be able to come out of Mahi's heart? Will love be able to awaken instead of this fear? To know more, keep listening to Oh Baby only on Love Pulse Diaries.